The champagne glasses were still raised when my husband stood up at our son's wedding dinner and tapped his fork against his glass. The gentle clinking sound cut through all the happy conversations around us. Everyone turned toward him, smiling broadly, expecting a heartfelt father of the groom toast. Instead, he looked straight at me with cold, distant eyes and said calmly, "Marjorie, I think it's time everyone knew the truth. I'm starting a new life tonight." Then he placed his hand possessively on the shoulder of the woman sitting directly across from me. His secretary, Vanessa Cole, 28 years old, blonde, beautiful, wearing a red dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Vanessa will be taking her place from now on. The entire room froze instantly. My son's wedding dinner had just become my public humiliation. 40 guests stared in complete shocked silence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. But instead of crying or screaming like he clearly expected, I reached slowly into my purse and felt the envelope I'd been carrying for 6 long weeks. And suddenly, I realized something important. He had just made the biggest mistake of his entire life. And I was about to prove it. My son Lucas Whitaker stood up, so fast his chair scraped loudly across the polished floor. "Dad, what are you doing?" His voice was sharp with confusion and rising anger. But my husband, Grant Whitaker, barely looked at him. He didn't seem to care about our son's feelings at all at that moment. Instead, he smiled down at Vanessa like this was a joyful celebration, like he'd just announced something wonderful instead of destroying his family in front of everyone who mattered to us. And that's when I noticed something strange and very telling. Vanessa wasn't surprised at all by this moment. She had been expecting it, clearly waiting for it. Her dress was too perfect, too carefully chosen, and expensive for a simple secretary attending her boss's son's wedding. Her makeup was flawless, applied with professional skill and obvious care. Her hair was styled elegantly, like she was the bride instead of just a guest at someone else's wedding. She had dressed for this announcement like it was her coronation, her moment of victory over me. Grant squeezed her bare shoulder possessively, claiming her publicly in front of my family. "Vanessa and I have been planning our future together for months now," he said confidently, like this was perfectly reasonable. Vanessa lifted her champagne glass slowly and gave me a tiny smile across the table. The kind of smile someone gives when they believe they've already won completely. That's when I knew something important about this entire situation. This announcement hadn't been impulsive or spontaneous at all. It had been planned very carefully, discussed in detail between them. They had rehearsed this moment probably, debated the timing, decided together that my son's wedding was the perfect stage for their dramatic revelation. The cruelty of it was absolutely breathtaking in its calculated nature. But what neither of them realized in their arrogance was that I had already discovered everything about their affair. Every lie Grant had told me over the past year. Every dollar he'd stolen from our accounts. Every secret meeting they'd had. For 6 long weeks I had been gathering evidence quietly and methodically, building my legal case carefully, preparing for this exact moment. While they planned my public humiliation, I had been planning their complete destruction. And now, watching Vanessa's smug expression across the table, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction deep inside. They had walked directly into my trap without knowing it, and they had absolutely no idea what was coming for them next. Not a clue. 6 weeks earlier, I was balancing our household accounts at the kitchen table when I noticed a strange transfer I'd never seen before.
$12,000.
Moved quietly from our joint savings account into an unfamiliar account I didn't recognize at all. At first I thought it must be a mistake, some banking error that would be corrected. Grant handled most of our business finances and investments. Maybe this was something legitimate that I just didn't know about yet. But something nagged at me persistently, kept pulling at my attention like a splinter under my skin. So I looked closer at the bank statement, studying all the details carefully. The account number was partially visible on the paper. I called the bank immediately, pretending to verify a recent transfer for tax purposes. The representative was helpful and friendly over the phone. "Yes, Mrs. Whitaker, that transfer went to the joint account you share with your husband. Account holders are listed as Grant Whitaker and Vanessa Cole." My heart stopped completely. The room seemed to tilt sideways. A joint account with his secretary. That wasn't a business investment at all. That was something else entirely, something that made my stomach turn over with sick realization. That was a secret life he was building without me. When I asked Grant about the transfer that evening over dinner, he barely looked up from his phone screen. Business investment, he said casually, like it was nothing important or concerning at all. Vanessa and I are exploring some new opportunities together. Don't worry about it. But I had spent 25 years working in financial compliance before I retired to raise Lucas properly. I knew corporate structures inside and out. I knew investment protocols and proper business practices. I knew legal requirements for partnerships. And I knew a lie when I heard one spoken directly to my face. The way he said it so dismissively, the way he avoided my eyes completely, the casual tone in his voice. All of it screamed deception to me. So, I did something I'd never done before in our entire marriage. I started investigating my own husband secretly. That night, after Grant fell asleep in our bed, I went through his phone very carefully. The password was easy to guess correctly. Our anniversary date, the same password he'd used for years without ever changing it. Inside his messages, I found text conversations that made my stomach turn and my hands shake with anger. Not just romantic messages between them, though there were plenty of those that made me sick, but detailed financial discussions that revealed everything clearly. When the money clears next week, we can put the deposit on the condo, Vanessa had written to him. Just need to move a few more transfers before she notices anything, Grant replied back.
She.
He meant me, his wife. The woman who'd supported his entire career for decades. The woman who'd raised his son, managed his home, sacrificed her own dreams for his success. I was just she, now in their conversations, an obstacle to work around carefully. One afternoon I stopped by Grant's office unannounced, bringing lunch to surprise him. I brought his favorite sandwich from the deli down the street. Vanessa greeted me at the reception desk with perfect politeness, her smile bright and completely fake. Mrs. Whitaker, how lovely to see you today. Grant's in a meeting right now, but he should be free in just a moment. But when Grant came out of his private office minutes later, his tie was crooked and loose. And Vanessa's lipstick was smudged slightly at the corners of her mouth. Neither of them noticed I had seen these obvious signs. They were too confident in their deception, too comfortable. Grant kissed my cheek like everything was completely normal between us. Honey, what a nice surprise visit, he said warmly. He smelled strongly, like perfume. Not mine. Something expensive and young-smelling. I brought your favorite sandwich, I said cheerfully, smiling like I suspected absolutely nothing. I know how hard you've been working on that new merger lately. Something inside me quietly shifted in that exact moment. This wasn't just a simple affair, some midlife crisis that might blow over eventually. This was a complete replacement of me. They weren't really hiding anymore, not carefully. They were practicing being a couple right in front of me, confident I was too blind or too stupid to notice the obvious signs. 2 weeks later, I traced the bank transfers again carefully, going through months of old statements systematically. There wasn't just one suspicious transfer I'd found. There were 23 separate withdrawals over 6 months. Grant had been quietly moving our money for a long time, very systematically. $500 here.
$2,000 there.
Sometimes larger amounts, like the $12,000 I'd first noticed on the statement. The total was absolutely staggering when I added everything up carefully. Over $60,000 moved from our retirement savings account. Money we'd saved together for our future. For security in our old age. He was funding expensive dinners at fancy restaurants, weekend trips to beach resorts, and jewelry gifts I'd never seen. All for Vanessa. All with our money I'd helped earn and save diligently. I printed every statement very carefully. I photographed every suspicious transaction with my phone. I documented exact dates, specific amounts, account numbers. Grant thought I was too trusting to notice anything, too focused on wedding planning for Lucas to pay attention to our finances anymore. He was completely wrong about that assumption. Dead wrong. Every single dollar he stole, I tracked meticulously. Every lie he told me, I recorded carefully in a notebook. By the end of that week, I had enough solid evidence to bury him completely in court. That night, I called someone I trusted with my life. My old college friend Eleanor Briggs. Eleanor was now one of the best divorce attorneys in the entire city, with an impressive reputation for winning difficult cases. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from our neighborhood, where nobody would recognize us together. I spread all the bank statements across the small table between us. Eleanor read them very carefully, her professional expression growing darker with each page she reviewed thoroughly. She studied the documents I brought, the transfers, and the screenshots of text messages I'd captured. Then she leaned back slowly in her chair. "Marjorie, does your husband remember the prenup he insisted on?" I frowned, confused by her question. Of course he remembers it.
Why?
The prenup had been Grant's complete obsession when we married 25 years ago. His first divorce had been extremely messy and expensive. He'd lost nearly everything he owned. He wanted protection this second time, ironclad legal guarantees. Eleanor smiled slowly, knowingly. Because I think he forgot one very important clause buried deep in there. She pulled out her phone and started taking detailed notes quickly. "This is better than I thought. Much, much better for you." The prenuptial agreement had been entirely Grant's idea from the start. He had insisted strongly on protecting his assets after his messy first divorce years ago. His first wife had taken half of everything he owned, and Grant swore repeatedly he'd never let that happen again to him. He'd hired an expensive lawyer to draft pages and pages of legal protection. But buried deep in the document was something interesting, something he'd insisted on including himself. A faithfulness clause. If either spouse committed adultery during the marriage, the entire prenup collapsed immediately and completely. Every protection Grant had carefully constructed would disappear like smoke. And suddenly Grant's entire empire became very vulnerable to attack. Eleanor explained it carefully to me, making sure I understood completely. When Grant insisted on this clause, he was worried about protecting himself from you. He thought you might cheat someday. But now it's going to protect you from him instead. The irony was absolutely perfect and poetic. Grant's paranoia from his first marriage had created the exact weapon that would destroy his second one. And he had handed it to me himself, signed and notarized officially. To activate that clause, we need solid proof of adultery, Eleanor said seriously. I smiled slightly, because by then I already had it all. Bank records showing systematic theft of marital assets over months. Photos I'd taken on my phone of Grant and Vanessa having romantic dinners at expensive restaurants across town. Hotel receipts I'd found in his car, stuffed carelessly in the glove compartment. Even a signed apartment lease with both their names on it. I'd followed Grant secretly one Saturday when he said he was playing golf with his business partner. Instead, he met Vanessa at a luxury apartment building downtown. They looked at a unit together, walked through it holding hands romantically. They signed leasing paperwork with the property agent. They kissed passionately in the parking lot afterward, right out in the open. I photographed absolutely everything from my car across the street, zooming in to capture their faces clearly and undeniably. And every single piece of evidence had Vanessa's name on it somewhere. "This is more than enough," Eleanor said quietly, her voice full of professional satisfaction. "This is absolutely devastating to him.
He won't be able to fight this."
Instead of confronting Grant directly and emotionally, Eleanor suggested something smarter and more strategic for me. "Let him expose himself publicly first," she said, leaning forward seriously. "When someone thinks they've already won completely, they make careless mistakes. They get overconfident and sloppy." So I waited patiently for weeks. I played the perfect wife very convincingly. I smiled at Grant's obvious lies. I pretended to believe his weak excuses about working late. I asked about his day and listened to his stories about work, knowing that half of them involved Vanessa in ways he wasn't admitting to me. And eventually, Grant planned the perfect moment for his betrayal. My son's wedding dinner. Eleanor had predicted it exactly. "Men like Grant love having an audience," she'd said knowingly. "He'll want to make a grand gesture publicly. He'll want everyone to see him moving on to someone younger and prettier. Let him do it. And then we'll destroy him in front of all those same witnesses who saw him humiliate you. 3 days before the wedding, Grant told me very casually over breakfast one morning. I invited Vanessa to the reception. I looked surprised, feigning confusion convincingly. But inside, I already knew exactly why he'd done it. He wasn't just bringing her as a polite guest. He was planning a spectacle, a public announcement of his new life. That's nice, I said carefully, keeping my voice neutral and unsuspicious. Any particular reason? Grant shrugged, not meeting my eyes directly. She's been helping organize some of the business aspects of the merger. Thought it would be good to include her, show appreciation for her work. But I'd already seen the text messages between them. He and Vanessa had planned this moment for weeks, discussing every detail carefully. They debated whether to announce before or during the reception. They'd even joked cruelly about my probable reaction. She'll probably cry in front of everyone. Vanessa had texted him meanly. Good, Grant replied back. Time for her to understand it's finally over between us. They had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. The night before the wedding, Eleanor handed me a sealed envelope at her office downtown. Inside were the divorce papers, professionally prepared by her legal team. The asset freezes to prevent him from moving more money. Bank fraud documentation from a forensic accountant. And the clause that would destroy Grant's financial protection completely. Everything was filed and ready to go. We just needed Grant to make his announcement first publicly, to reveal his affair in front of witnesses. All you have to do, Eleanor said quietly, looking me directly in the eyes, is let him make the first move. Let him announce his betrayal publicly. Let everyone see what he's doing to you and your family. Then hand him this envelope. Eleanor had timed everything perfectly, down to the exact minute. The moment Grant revealed his affair publicly in front of witnesses, the faithfulness clause would activate automatically. His prenup would become worthless paper. And every dollar he'd stolen would have to be returned to me. With interest. The envelope felt heavy in my hands. It contained the end of my marriage and the destruction of Grant's carefully planned future with Vanessa. Are you ready for this? Eleanor asked seriously. I nodded firmly. I was ready. More ready than I'd ever been for anything in my life. Standing in that silent reception hall, Grant waited for my reaction confidently. He expected tears, probably. Or anger and screaming. Maybe I would stand up and scream at him in front of everyone. Maybe I would slap him hard across the face. That's what he wanted, I realized clearly. Drama. A big emotional scene that would prove I was the hysterical, unstable wife he needed to escape from. The woman who couldn't handle being replaced by someone younger and better. Instead, I smiled softly at him. Then I slid the envelope across the white tablecloth toward him slowly. Since we're sharing announcements tonight, I said calmly, my voice steady and clear, you might want to read this first. My voice didn't shake at all. My hands were completely steady. Around us, 40 guests watched in frozen silence. Lucas was still standing, his face pale with shock and confusion. Grant looked at the envelope like it might explode in his hands. What is this? His voice tried to sound confident, but I heard uncertainty creeping in. He wasn't expecting this reaction from me at all. Grant opened the envelope with a confident smile, still playing his role. But as he read the first page carefully, the color drained completely from his face. The prenup clause. The bank transfers, all documented clearly. The fraud investigation notice. Everything laid out in legal language. Line by line, I watched him realize what I'd done, what I knew. Vanessa leaned closer to read over his shoulder noisily. And suddenly her smile disappeared too. Her perfectly made-up face went slack with shock. Grant's hands started shaking visibly. The papers rustled as he flipped through them faster and faster, his eyes scanning desperately. Divorce petition. Asset freeze order. Documentation of 23 separate fraudulent transfers. Photographs of him and Vanessa at restaurants, hotels, the apartment building. Eleanor had included everything, even things I hadn't known she'd gathered independently. Testimony from the bank about the suspicious account activity. A forensic accountant's report detailing exactly how much Grant had stolen and where it went. It was complete, thorough, professional, and absolutely devastating. His face went from confident to pale to gray as he read. Guests began whispering urgently to each other all around us. Lucas stepped forward quickly and grabbed the papers from Grant's trembling hands. "What's in these papers, Dad?" Grant tried to hide them, reaching out weakly. But it was already too late. Vanessa had already read the most important line out loud without thinking. Prenuptial agreement void due to documented adultery. She read it in a high, shocked voice. The whispers grew much louder, spreading across the entire room like wildfire. Lucas's eyes scanned the pages quickly, his expression changing from confusion to understanding to pure fury. "You've been stealing from Mom?" His voice carried across the entire silent room. "You moved $60,000 to a secret account with her?" He pointed at Vanessa, accusingly. Grant tried desperately to speak, but no words came out. His mouth opened and closed uselessly, like a fish drowning in air. This wasn't how this evening was supposed to go at all. He was supposed to be the victor tonight, the man who'd traded up, the husband who'd found someone better. Instead, he was exposed publicly as a thief and a liar. His reputation was destroyed in front of everyone who mattered to him professionally and personally. Vanessa stared at Grant in complete disbelief and growing anger. "You said the prenup protected everything." Her voice was no longer sweet and flirtatious at all. It was sharp and accusing, full of betrayal. Grant looked stunned, still processing what was happening. "I thought it did." His voice was barely a whisper now, but the document said otherwise, black and white and undeniable. And suddenly, Vanessa realized something terrifying for her future. The money she thought she'd married into was gone. The wealthy businessman she'd been planning her luxurious future with was about to lose everything. The apartment they'd leased together would have to be canceled. The lifestyle she'd been promised was evaporating right in front of her eyes. "You told me she'd never fight back," Vanessa hissed at him angrily. "You said she was too weak, too dependent on you to do anything." Grant couldn't answer her. He was still staring at the papers like they might change if he looked long enough. But they wouldn't. Everything Eleanor and I had built was airtight, legal,
Documented.
unbreakable. His world was collapsing around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it now. My lawyer Eleanor entered the reception hall right on cue. Perfect timing. I'd texted her secretly from under the table when Grant started his announcement. She walked in calmly, professionally, like she was arriving for a business meeting instead of a wedding reception. Grant finally found his voice, desperate now. "Embezzlement? I can't embezzle for myself." Eleanor smiled coldly. This was potentially criminal. Vanessa stood there silently for a long moment, thinking hard. Then she looked at Grant with cold calculation. I could see her mind working rapidly, adding up the costs, weighing her options carefully. Everything she thought she was gaining had just disappeared. "You didn't tell me any of this." Her voice was ice. Grant reached for her hand desperately. "Vanessa, we can fix this. We can fight it together." But she pulled away sharply and walked out of the wedding reception without another word to anyone. No goodbye to Grant. No apology to me or Lucas. She just grabbed her designer purse and walked out on her high heels, leaving Grant standing alone amid the wreckage of his grand announcement. I watched her go and felt something like pity. Not for her, but for how quickly she abandoned Grant the moment his money disappeared. Their great love story had lasted exactly as long as his bank account remained full. About 3 minutes total. Grant turned toward me desperately, pleading now. "Marjorie, we can fix this. We can talk about everything. This doesn't have to end like this." But the room had already seen everything. His betrayal laid bare, his lies exposed completely, his panic obvious to everyone watching. And for the first time in 25 years, I felt nothing toward him. No love.
No anger. No sadness.
Just a cold, clear certainty that this marriage was over and had been for a long time. "You made your announcement, Grant," I said quietly. "Now live with the consequences." Lucas was beside me now, his arm around my shoulders protectively. My son had chosen his side. Around us, family members were starting to understand fully what had happened. Grant's brother was shaking his head in disgust. My sister was crying quietly into her napkin. Lucas's new wife looked horrified. This was supposed to be their celebration, their special day. Grant had turned it into a circus. And now he was standing alone as the clown. Lucas stepped beside me quietly. Then he looked at his father with disappointment and anger. "I can't believe you did this today of all days." His voice was steady, but I heard the pain underneath. Grant tried to speak desperately. "Son, you don't understand. Your mother and we've been having problems for years." Lucas cut him off sharply. "So you steal from her? You move money into secret accounts? You plan to humiliate her at my wedding?" Grant reached toward him, but Lucas turned away and placed his arm around my shoulders instead, making his choice clear to everyone. "Mom's staying for the rest of the reception," Lucas announced to the room firmly. "Anyone who has a problem with that can leave with him."
He pointed at Grant.
The room stayed completely silent. Nobody moved toward the exit. Nobody left with Grant. Grant stood there alone, still holding the divorce papers, and slowly realized he had no allies left. Even his own brother refused to meet his eyes. Grant walked out alone 15 minutes later, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Within weeks, the legal consequences unfolded quickly and decisively. The prenup collapsed completely. Grant's hidden accounts were exposed and frozen. The court ordered an immediate asset freeze while the fraud investigation continued. And the court ruled that half of his company legally belonged to me. Grant tried to fight it desperately. He hired an expensive attorney who argued that the prenup should be honored despite the affair. But Eleanor destroyed every argument with documentation. Photos, bank records, text messages, even testimony from the apartment leasing office about Grant and Vanessa signing documents together as a couple planning a future. The judge was not sympathetic at all. "Mr. Whitaker," she said from the bench, her voice stern, "you cannot systematically defraud your spouse and then claim contractual protection. The prenup clause is clear. You violated its terms intentionally. The agreement is void." Grant left the courtroom looking 10 years older, defeated and alone. Without Grant's money, Vanessa disappeared from his life almost instantly. The apartment lease was canceled quickly. She moved out of the unit they'd planned to share, leaving no forwarding address. Her luxury lifestyle vanished overnight. The designer clothes, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips all paid for with money Grant stole from our retirement. And the new life she thought she had won simply evaporated. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Vanessa had moved to another city entirely. She'd found another wealthy man to attach herself to, someone without a wife to complicate things. Grant tried calling her for weeks afterward. She never answered once. The great romance he'd sacrificed his marriage for had been a transaction. And when the money stopped, so did her interest completely. He'd thrown away 25 years for a woman who'd left him the moment things got difficult. The irony was not lost on anyone who knew the story. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. I reopened the catering business I'd abandoned years earlier when Lucas was born. The same dream Grant once told me was impractical and not worth the investment of time and money. With my share of the divorce settlement, I rented a commercial kitchen space downtown. I hired a small but talented staff of 3 people. I started taking orders for corporate events and private parties. And it was thriving beyond my expectations. Everything I'd sacrificed for Grant's career, his comfort, his success, I was finally building for myself. Lucas was proud of me. He and his wife were my first clients, hiring me to cater a friend's birthday party. Word spread quickly through their network of friends. Within 3 months, I was fully booked solid. The business I'd dreamed about for decades was finally real. And every success felt sweeter, knowing I'd built it from the ashes of Grant's betrayal. I named the business Second Chances Catering. Because that's what this was for me. A second chance at the life I'd always wanted. At following my dreams instead of supporting someone else's. At building something that belonged entirely to me. My signature dish became a lemon cake that people requested constantly. Sometimes betrayal doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it sets you free. Grant thought replacing me at my son's wedding would be the beginning of his new life. A dramatic fresh start with a younger woman. Freedom from a marriage he'd grown bored with. But in the end, it was the moment he lost everything. And the moment I finally got mine back. I learned something important through this whole experience. Patience and preparation defeat impulse every single time. While Grant and Vanessa planned their public announcement, I'd been quietly building a legal case. While they celebrated their deception, I'd been gathering evidence. And while they thought I was too weak to fight back, I was preparing to destroy them both. The envelope I carried to that wedding dinner contained more than divorce papers. It contained my future, my freedom, my revenge, and it felt absolutely perfect. Grant called me once, 3 months after the divorce was final. He wanted to apologize, to explain himself. I listened for 30 seconds. Then I said, "Grant, I hope you find happiness. But you won't find it with me." And I hung up. That was the last time we ever spoke. I never looked back after that conversation. A year after the wedding disaster, Lucas and his wife invited me to dinner. "Mom, we have something to tell you," Lucas said nervously. "We're having a baby. You're going to be a grandmother." I cried happy tears. Real tears, not the tears Grant expected at the wedding. These were tears of joy for a future I got to be part of. "Does Dad know?" I asked. Lucas shook his head. "I haven't spoken to him in months. He's not part of my life anymore. Not after what he did to you." I felt sad for a moment. Not for me, but for Grant. He'd lost his son along with everything else. But that had been his choice. His decision to prioritize a temporary affair over his permanent family. The baby arrived 6 months later. A beautiful girl named Eleanor, after my lawyer friend who'd helped me through the darkest time. Holding my granddaughter, I realized something profound. Grant's betrayal hadn't just freed me. It had shown me who I really was underneath all those years of being his wife. I was stronger than I'd ever known, smarter than anyone had given me credit for, and capable of building a beautiful life entirely on my own terms. The wedding dinner disaster was the best thing that ever happened to me, just not in the way Grant planned.